I want to add some controls for a pivot cam into my panel. I want a joystick so I can make some fine adjustments to the camera. I'd like the zoom and the iris controls, and I'd also like to be able to recall 4 or 5 different shots. So let's go into DashBoard and do that. I've already made a custom panel with a couple sliders. This is a trick I've shown in a previous video, and it gives me a little canvas that I can easily resize to see how things adjust. And we're going to work within this canvas. So the first thing to do is to actually add the pivot cam to my dashboard panel. So I'm going to click this plus here and click on Cameras and PTZ Camera and click on Next. Now I'm going to put in the IP address of my camera. I'm also going to change the display name so that's easier for me to find which camera is which. So this is my center camera. And click on Finish. And the camera should appear in my tree here. After a second, it should become green once it's connected to it. And we can open its panel. In this panel, I can recall presets, so I can store and recall shots, or I can use the joystick to make some fine adjustments. And that's the kind of things I want in my own panel. So we're going to just click and drag some of these things over to my panel. I'm going to move this PTZ camera over to the right. And then in our panel, we're going to make a container to contain the things that I want. Now, the things that I want are different sizes. So when I want elements of a different size in one kind of grid, I usually use a table. So I'm going to go to Table. I'm going to put down a table in my canvas here. And in this case, I've already figured out that I want 4 columns. So I'm going to want one for the joystick, one for the iris, one for the zoom, and one for my recall buttons. So that gives me kind of a grid where I can put things. So let's start with the actual joystick here. So in the remote control panel, I'm going to hit Control G to go into panel builder mode. I'm going to take this joystick and drag it into the cell that's the most left one. Now, this is the first time I'm adding something from this camera to this panel, so it's asking me, am I going to be adding more elements? And I am. So I want it to add it to this entire table. I want this whole table to be pointed to this camera. And I'm going to add to the table and hit OK. So now anything I add to this table from this camera, I won't have to add another pointer or another context to this table. So I now have my joystick. I also want the iris and the zoom, and I can actually grab these whole widgets here from the camera panel. So I want the iris, I'm going to drag it into that cell, and I want the zoom, and I'm going to drag it into this cell here. Now let's go to the presets. Now unfortunately I can't bring in one button at a time. This whole table is created as one big widget, and that's not what I want. I want individual buttons, so I'm going to have to create buttons that do these recalls. So let's do that from our panel. So let's go back into our panel. And I'm going to want a simple grid on the right that's going to contain 4 or 5 different buttons. I'm using a simple grid because I want all the buttons to be the same size. So I'm going to go to Grids and Tables, Simple Grid, and I'm just going to click in that cell. And I'm going to say we're going to add 4 buttons. So I want 4 rows. And I want about 10 pixels of space between each button. Okay. Now, my simple grid is very narrow, so let's go in here, double click on it, and go to Table Cell Attributes. I'm going to force this grid to be a specific width. I want it to be, say, 80 pixels wide, and apply and close. And now that simple grid will be 80 pixels. And all the other table elements will resize based on that. All right, so let's make a button. So I'm going to take button. I'm just going to click in my simple grid to make the first button. I'm going to say I want to recall shot 1. And I'm going to add a task. Now, because I've already added the camera parameters, the camera is showing up here in my visual logic. And I can just open it, go to commands, and say I want to do a cut of what shot. I want shot number 1, and I don't need a callback, so I'll leave that as null. And OK. And then I can do the same thing. I can click with a button. I'm going to say this is shot 5, add, go to the camera, commands, cut, shot number 5. Okay, okay, and then 2 more. So shot 7, add, commands, cut, 7, Okay. And one more. So this will be shot 9. I'm just picking arbitrary numbers. Commands, cut, 9. Okay. Okay. So I now have all the elements that I want. I have my joystick, I have my iris and zoom, and I have my shots. Now, one thing about this joystick, though, is that if I start moving it, it doesn't automatically go back to 0 the same way that it does in the camera shots. You see, if I move this one, it goes back to 0 when I release it. They've made some special code around this joystick that as soon as someone releases the joystick, it goes back to 0. Now, we can do the same thing with an OG script tag here, but there's actually an easier way. If I go into panel builder mode and double click on the parameter, I can actually change it from an absolute positioner to an absolute joystick and apply and close. And the absolute joystick actually snaps back to 0 when you let go of it. So it automatically takes care of that part. So I can now play around and see how things resize as I resize this. And there's a couple of things I want to change here. I find the iris and zoom are taking up too much room. So I'm going to double click on iris, go to the table cell attributes, and actually force it to be only 100 pixels wide. I'm going to do the same thing with the zoom, table cell attributes, force it to be exactly 100 pixels wide. And that to me looks better. So I now have something that resizes nicely. The joystick takes up most of the room and the buttons take up the rest of the room. So I'm pretty happy with this. So I now have control over my camera. I can make minute adjustments with the joystick, and I can recall the few shots that I care about for this production.